Very good, very good. Welcome, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce Kim Strubell, who will now speak to you about Charity Seeds. Kim is originally from Connecticut, but I understand he upgraded to Fairfield a few years ago and started Charity Seeds about 10 years ago, and I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much. A lot of you already know about Charity Seeds, so I was thinking of ways to changing it up a little bit, but now that I got a camera on me and it's going nationwide, I think I'm sticking to the script. It's nice to see everyone, and really there's a lot of people already sitting here that have been supporting Charity Seeds over the last 10 years, and thank you. Bob, Faith, Kevin did my website, so it's a pleasure to be here. And Charity Seeds is an organization that I started 10 years ago. And what we do is we bring small-scale organic farms to people in need. So what I mean by that is I look for places of emergency. And one of those places that we're in right now is Uganda in Africa. And this is a project that showed up 10 years towards the end, right now. And we go to the refugee camps there. And in one refugee camp, there's over 200,000 families. And when I look at the history of those refugee camps, I'm really happy that we're there and the projects that we're doing, because it's becoming the perfect model for small-scale organic farms to people in need. And we started there about a year ago, and I have a trainer there. His name is Walter. And Walter, I always hire people from the area. I never go outside to bring in trainers. If we're in Uganda, we're using Uganda trainers. If we're in Kenya, we're using Kenya trainers. Wherever we are, that's what we do, because it only makes sense. These people already know the soils. They already know the water and the wind and the sun, and they know their indigenous seeds. So it makes sense to use the people from that area, and it adds to that loop of sustainability too. That was the number one thing that I had in my mind when building this organization, is that it had to be sustainable. And that word kind of changed the meaning of it changed for me over the last 10 years. And every time I looked at it, I realized it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't truly sustainable. Because, for example, we have a garden that we're bringing in, and we use our trainer there to teach the children how to grow organic farms, okay? But how sustainable really is it? Because it always depended on Charity Seeds. So that loop was broken, and I had to figure out a way how to fix this loop, this sustainability loop. Because now, it's not about money. It really is about people. And so I went to that formula, and I realized there's one solution here. We teach them how to save their seeds. We teach them how to grow their soil. We teach them how to save water. But the one ingredient that was missing is, once Charity Seeds stepped away, the projects just stayed in that one place. It didn't move on. So the answer to this is that it had to be people to people. In Central and South America, there was an organization called Campesino to Campesino, farmers to farmers. And I met a man down there. I was in Guatemala, and I met one of the founders in Guatemala who started this organization, Campesino to Campesino, farmers to farmers. And all this is the farmers taught other farmers, and they traded knowledge. So now this loop of sustainability was complete, because they didn't need anybody but themselves now. No outside inputs at all. No organizations, no money, because they saved their seeds. They had their own little greenhouses and did seedlings, and they grew their own soil, and they traded knowledge family to family, and that kept on. And in Central and South America, thousands and thousands of people, thousands of farmers started to take this on and started to grow their own organic gardens. Unfortunately, at that time in the late 60s and 70s, this guy, Manuel Juez, who was the founder of it, and I'm staying in his house now. I lived with him for 3 weeks and heard his story. I taped it and listened to him and his wife. The government came in, and because these gardens were so successful, these small-scale organic gardens were so successful, they started leaving the plantations. They started leaving Chiquita and Dole and just staying and doing their own farms and trading their own vegetables and creating co-ops. They had whole systems, these systematic systems that they put in place themselves. So I listened to his stories, and I was so crazy. I didn't get it. I didn't get how this really worked. It took me a long time to truly understand it. But Emmanuel Juez, now the United States came in and started to influence this organization also. And this is a sad story here. They actually started shooting the farmers, literally killing them. And Emmanuel Juez put 2 children on his back and walked from, he was in Guatemala, he walked to Mexico with his children on his back to escape being killed and his family. He returned from Mexico and went back to Guatemala 10 years later. And he bought a farm and wanted to start up Farmers to Farmers again. And he tried, and he had his son going to school. He was teaching his son how to do agroecology, trying to start it up, and he couldn't get it going. The momentum wasn't there. The times were different. It changed. I went to visit him and his son in Guatemala, and we started talking, and I said, I'd like to give it a shot. And his son was Mario. We went around, literally walked around to schools, and we knocked on the doors, and we talked to the principals, and we asked if we could put a little garden in their school and start teaching children. And it almost took a year for them to say yes. And then once it happened, we had one garden in. People started to walk over. The campesino philosophy started to take hold. They started walking over to the garden, the neighbors, and saying, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And so now it became people to people again. And they started teaching neighbors to neighbors. That's the key to this whole thing that makes it a movement about people and not about money. So we took this philosophy to Uganda. We went to a refugee camp. I got the trainers, we got the seeds and the seedlings, and we went in to the refugee camp, and we started to not me, the trainer there, went and talked to the people if they wanted to put in a garden. They all said, this is crazy. The earth is dead here. We can't grow anything. My trainer taught them how to grow the soil, simply with composting. And their ways of doing it there are different. They're simple, real simple. For example, the only tool they need is a grub hoe, a djembe. And they use things like an A-frame with a string on it and a rock. So now they don't need lasers to do the contouring. It's a simple, simple tool. And everyone can do it. That's why it's so sustainable. Even their composting. I don't want to degrade this person in particular, but I talked to Elaine Ingram, and she does the composting and the, what's it called, Faith? Tea composting. And it's very, very, it's unbelievably good, but it also takes you a microscope to do it. And I said to her, these people that I work with don't have 25 cents to send me an email. How are they going to have a microscope? She goes, well, how will you do it then? And I said, I'll ask them. They know how to do it. And what it was is they had a pole they stuck down into the compost, about 3 inches in diameter. And every other day they'd pull it out a little bit and find out how hot it was with their hand. And they test the temperature of all the composting soil, and they know just by that pole and smelling it and tasting it if it was ready. So they could grow their soil without any outside input. They're using the banana leaves. They're using all the vegetation from the yard. And so that system of sustainability was building and working. And then water. And then all of a sudden, they are starting to talk to their neighbors. And at this refugee camp where we have over 200,000 families, now we have a school there with 2,000 children who have gardens. And over 100 families already have gardens. And I'm getting reports now from the refugee camps that these gardens, this is a perfect model. Like women who said they never had food for their children before, and the kids couldn't go to school because they were hungry. They have to go out to the forest and they pick weeds, to boil weeds for their vegetables. That's how bad it is. But now they have organic gardens right in their homes. And the homes are just these, it's so funny. We're looking at tiny homes here, you know. They already got the perfect system, the infrastructure. And now they got the gardens there, and they're surrounding the gardens that are starting to grow. And now we have hundreds of gardens already at these refugee camps. But the most important thing is that system of people to people, neighbor to neighbor. That's where it has to be. Because once you have to depend on an organization to keep it going, it's not sustainable anymore. So that was probably the most important thing that I learned in the last 10 years. When we first started, we did a gunshot approach, that we went out and we just wanted to put as many gardens as we could, and we were in Kenya. And we put in 17,000 gardens in like the first 2 years. But I have to go back and I say it wasn't accountable. I don't know how many are still doing it. But now that we got the orphanages going and the refugee camps, there's so much accountability there, and there's the perfect model. And I realized I don't have to do anything anymore, because the news people are coming into the refugee camps, because there's new refugees coming into the camps every day from Sudan or wherever. And they're coming in, and the news people are there. They're starting to ask questions now. They're taking pictures and news things of the camps, and all these vegetables are growing. And mothers are reporting to them, this is the first time I have healthy breast milk for my children because I'm eating organic food. It's such an incredible thing, and it's all about people. That's the point I'm trying to get across. It's not about me. It's not about charity seeds. It's about them doing it themselves and maintaining that integrity of the indigenous seeds and also the indigenous knowledge of agroecology. So even agroecology I call indigenous farming, you know. So every place is different. We're in Guatemala, we're in Colombia, we're in Ethiopia, we're in Uganda, Kenya. Ethiopia we opened up this week. We're at a school now that's opening up with 2,000 children. We have a little bit new direction with that school, is we're doing medicinal stuff. We're teaching them how to grow plants that can help their health. And so that's going to be an exciting project. And I have an actual MD that's directing it there too, with the trainer teaching the organic gardening. So that's an exciting project, adding that piece of it to it. And they know this, they already know it, but they don't know how to prepare it, and the doctor's going to be a big help. So that's taking place in Ethiopia. It's funny when Bob said, tell the story about the sandals. When I was in Kenya, I was just being like a journalist, going around and trying to find out what they need. And I went to Kisumu, the city of Kisumu. I wanted to go and see the Lake Victoria where the hippos were, and the crocodiles. And so I go there and I take a boat out and I'm looking for the hippos, and I see these children just jumping off of trees into the lake. These boys all naked, just jumping in the lake. And I said, hey, I'd rather go see those kids than explore the lake. And so I went to see the children, about 12 boys. They were in the lake swimming. And I brought 12 loaves of bread to them. I had it in my arms, and they all run over to me to get the bread, and they're all naked. And then I take out my camera to take pictures, and obviously they're taking the bread and covering themselves. So it's a great experience. And these boys were street boys. They lived on the streets. And I actually was envy of their lifestyle. I said, this is great. All they do is swim, jump off trees, wash some trucks for, steal some food from the markets. And it was crazy watching them. And I really, really loved them. And I was in Kisumu, I'm walking down the street, and I have bananas in my hand. I head to my hotel, and I have bananas in my left hand. And I'm just walking in the crowd, and all of a sudden I get hit real hard on my left-hand side. And one of the street boys bumped me and stole my bananas. He's running down the street. And then he turns around, he looks at me, he goes, "Chuck Norris!" So if I caught him, I would have kicked his butt, but I couldn't catch him. So anyway, the excitement of these street boys was alive, and I just wanted to follow through and see if I could do something with street boys in Kenya. We opened up a place called the Rescue Center in Kenya, in Thika, Kenya, and we had 100 street boys there, kids off the street. Now, these street boys, you have to understand, have a dark side to it, too. They go to the park and bring the shoe glue and sniff the glue all day. And their eyes were dark. Their eyes were black from this, and they weren't healthy. So we helped open a rescue center, and it's been about 3 years now with these 100 street boys there. This is probably one of the most successful stories that Charity Seeds has. These 100 street boys have a food forest, and they're totally food independent. 100 street boys. They are actually taking their vegetables and going to the markets and selling some and trading for rice or trading for fish, whatever can supplement more. But 100 street boys are totally independent now. And this brings me to where I wanted to change the script a little bit, because it's starting to show up that we have 10 years of history now and 10 years of models and success. And when I said when we first started, oh, David, you can go to the next slide. Well, so the success story is that I said we go to a place of emergency, a place of need, like the orphanage or the refugee camps, place of need. And so we had that place of emergency, and then we started putting in the gardens. And you could see some improvement with the children, some objective things like the children their attendance at school was better. And I can't really say this for sure, but it seemed like grades were improving, that they wanted to be there more, because they weren't going to school hungry now. They'd want to be there. They'd rather be at school than not. And so now that they have gardens there and they can and feed themselves, they can go to school. So we had that emergency, and then we had that state of emergence where they started to improve. This is where it gets exciting for me, because not only am I seeing that and seeing how grateful they are and happy, that there's an element of joy there now too. And this is where it gets exciting for me, because there's something called an emergent property. I'm going to have to define emergent property, because I didn't know what it was. I just learned it myself about a week ago. An emergent property is, an example would be H2O, water. When you have H2O, and you put the molecules together, you got water. And then when you put many of them together, you keep adding them, you get what's called the whole being more than the sum of its parts. And there's an emergent property coming off of that. And that emergent property of that is wetness. It's something you can't anticipate. You don't know what it's going to be. That's where I'm getting to right now after the 10 years of working on these farms and watching these models become very successful. There's an emergent property coming out of it. And that's what I'm studying myself personally. I'm getting that fulfillment out of that. I don't know what that emergent property is, but I'm seeing things like the children, not only are they going to school more and stuff, when they start to harvest, when they're together and start to harvest, and all this chaos that was first started, the ground, all the chaos in the ground, then you're adding seeds, and then you're adding water, and that whole coming together, and they come together and they have a harvest, and all the children are together. There's an emergent property coming off of this. I'm actually seeing the children start to hum when they're harvesting. That's an incredible emergent property. Because what that shows me is not only is it humming and singing, they're in touch with the plants. They're in touch with that soil. And that's what's creating the emergent property. The whole becoming more than the sum of its parts. I actually think the emergent property, after seeing these children's faces now and their eyes that used to be black, they're glowing. And there's radiance there. And to me, that's the emergent property. So that took 10 years to come up with, and I will study it and see if that's consistent, you know, with all the children, because the humming isn't consistent. It's consistent with certain groups. And places are different, and you know, obviously the nature is different everywhere. So some are singing, the mothers are singing, the children are humming, but that radiance is consistent. And that's the whole thing that I've, you know, been working on for 10 years. So the simple tools, I was talking about the djembe, that's the only tool they need. That's it. And then there's you can just see them. And we do some methodology that is, you know, consistent with the agroecology. For example, in some areas where soil is so dense, and even rocks, you know, we have to clear the rocks, and we do what's called double digging. We go down a little bit further. And that allows us to, when they do double digging, you see them digging a little bit deeper than usual? Well, it allows us to do companion planting. The planting is closer together, and it gives us 70% more vegetables in one small area. Also, the water, when you're digging down, you start to save water because now the roots are going straight down. They're not crowding each other and stealing from each other, so they go straight down and grab some water. And so you've heard of the system of 3 sisters. It's where you use corn, the stalk, and then you use beans to grow up it. And then you grow squash under it for the shade. So right there, you're increasing your numbers by 70%. Just using it, and the companion planting is incredible. They're getting a lot of food in that very, very small area. So that's the only tool they need. And the double digging, oh, there's Emmanuel Huez, the man who I told you who started Campesino the Campesino. He's there teaching them agroecology in Guatemala. We worked with a lot of Mayans there. And that was a very successful story too, because he introduced me to one family. And as we did their garden, 85 families came over. We had a community garden with 85 families in just 2 days starting. So that's how it works when you got people to people. Saving seeds, we feel that, you know, we built little greenhouses like this, where just with some bamboo and some plastic, and we do seedlings because you can, you know, using a seedling, you're saving a lot of water. You're just watering that seedling. But if you're doing the shotgun approach out in a garden with seeds, you got to use a lot of water to get to those seeds. So we you know, and they're also, they do things like they fan the plants because they know the wind there, the wind cycles, and they strengthen the plant just by fanning it. So teaching the plant what the wind's going to be like later. So simple, sustainable pieces like that of agroecology. This is an orphanage in Colombia. Father Gabriel, many people may know him. We put in 3 gardens, 3 orphanages there, and they've been pretty good. I think that is Colombia at an orphanage. And we're doing schools too. The schools are a little trickier because you get a lot of these schools, like in Africa, you could have 2,000, 3,000 children. It's almost impossible to teach them. So we start clubs. We do little garden clubs. And that, you know, gives us 30, 40 kids, and we work that way. Just some of, I mean, even the greenhouses they build are pretty nice. That's Colombia also, community garden. Yeah, Kenya is where we did most of our work. Like I said, 17,000 gardens. But now we have about 10 schools and probably about 10 orphanages going in Kenya also. Yeah, it was my first project. I went there myself, and I found other organizations is how I did it. Truthfully, I rode their coattails. They were NGOs already set up. And then we talked and we gave our, you know, ideas of what to do. And we had about 3 or 4 other NGOs that allowed us to go out and do numbers. That took about 2 years to do that only. Yeah. When I say farms, these are small gardens. You know, yeah, they're gardens. They're no bigger than this.
Like home gardens?
Yeah, home gardens. Yeah, yeah. But these are a little bigger. The schools are, you know, good models for teaching. The one thing I liked about the schools was the parents, like when it happened when the kids had vacation, and the parents, they didn't want the gardens to die, so the parents came in during the school vacations, during the summer vacation, and took care of the gardens. So that was an indication that they really wanted to keep going. I like that was a success story too. Guatemala, working with Mayans, and have the orphanages there were very successful. We also went to vocational schools. You know, they were learning plumbing and electrical and carpentry, but they started to bring in agroecology. And we had one Mayan school that started to actually bring the language back also with the gardens and using indigenous seeds, the Mayan seeds. So it's just incredible. You know, I'm very proud of the whole situation. Charity Seeds, we run very lean, because we don't have infrastructure. We're not buying tractors. We're not building schools. So to put in a garden like this cost me probably $100. Where'd you find such a young picture? That's about it. I'd like to open it to questions, if I may.
Questions?
If people want to support your work, they can go to charityseeds.org and just go to donate and put in $10 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month, whatever you can afford, and that helps you keep this thing going.
Yeah, it's all donation based, and basically we just use social media. And I do all the social media, and I don't take a salary, so it's not going to big salaries. Not yet.
So, Kim, could you give us an idea if somebody were to donate $10 a month, what would that, what's the impact of a small donation like that?
You get a T-shirt.
Get a T-shirt?
No.
Okay.
No, actually, $20. Let's go with 20.
Okay.
$20 because of the way the system is, and we're not building infrastructure. You know, we're not buying microscopes. We're using those simple tools, and all you need is seeds and a little knowledge of how to plant those seeds and take care of them. $20 will feed a family of 6 forever.
Wow, think about that impact. That's pretty huge. So as you began this nonprofit, I'll get to you next. As you began this nonprofit, what was the biggest challenge? I'm thinking entrepreneurially. What was the biggest challenge you had as you got this thing launched and started? You know, if all of these folks here wanted to begin a nonprofit, what would be the top pieces of advice you would share with them to avoid the pitfalls and challenges that you may have faced?
Well, it's doing an international foundation. It's not easy to get grants. It's very difficult doing international. Locally, doing a foundation here, you can get grants a lot easier in town. So that's the consideration. I went international, and I had some major challenges getting funds at the beginning. And so, and then just the main thing is make sure, just like any business, is just keep that horse before the cart. Make sure you got the money before you spend it. And so if you got a trainer, that person has a family. Make sure you can take care of them every month before you move on. And my biggest challenge, I think, was finding trainers for the charity. Because now I had to have a trainer in every country or wherever we went. But I kind of lucked out because I met organizations there, and they had already networked and opened up training facilities for people. John Jevons was one of them, of California, doing Grow Biointensive. He already had a training facility in Kenya that he had over 200 students come out of it already, and this is a 2-year program. So I called John, but he didn't answer the phone, but I emailed him, and I said that I wanted to open an organization in Kenya that brought small-scale farms. And I want to use, he said, you're doing an incredible job training these people because they're all coming out, you know, very knowledgeable at Grow Biointensive. And I said, but the only thing is, these people don't want to just go home and start a farm, start a garden. They want to go teach. So I saw that there was a downfall there. I said, these people don't have money to go teach. They don't have money to start these things. So I said to John Jevons that I would create an organization that supported the teachers. So now I had a network of 200 trainers already in Kenya and all over the world with more because of John Jevons. So using these people who have great success stories of, and just co-oping with them because it works. It works.
That's great. We've got a question over here.
Well, actually, it's just a comment of what you said, that your business model, I think, has achieved the success and penetration it has by just, you're just like one guy getting going, but you drop into John Jevons' network of 200 trainers. You
Yes.
drop into NGOs in a host country that
Yes.
already have an infrastructure, and you say, look, I can bring this model, and boom, you flow out through their network. So harnessing the power of aligned networks is, from an entrepreneurial principles point of view, that's how you get ramped up and plugged in quickly.
Yeah, that happened very fast too.
Yeah, I have a second question though, because it all starts with the local seeds, and I'm curious, all right, where do you go find a bunch of seeds in the middle of Guatemala or Kenya or Uganda that can get the program going?
There's seeds everywhere, but finding the organic indigenous seeds takes more time and patience. But that's why I only hire local people, because they know these things. They know where to get the trees. They know where to get the seedlings. And so I don't have to watch that. I just make sure that if it's not organic, we just stay organic with those seedlings and try to transition it, But that's not a problem. And now that we're saving seeds and creating greenhouses, we're actually creating co-ops now too. Small co-ops in villages. Like we started with the Maasai. We had 1,700 Maasai. I almost said meditating. We have 1,700 people in the Maasai villages starting gardens, all starting to just co-op and help each other. But they know about the seeds. That's why it's so important to stay with that local trainer.
Okay. Other questions? Other questions? Here we go. One sec.
Kim, what lessons would you say your experience has for us here? Because certainly if we can do home gardens and create greater self-sufficiency in situations that are very straitened circumstances compared to ours, what could we do? What could translate from your work here to creating a greater state of self-sufficiency right here, particularly with our lower income families?
The first thing I would do, I would look to your locals. Find out who's already doing it. And there are some people in this room that are already doing it. And that's your resource right there. You don't have to go any further. Faith is number one. David's book and research is very powerful. And we got the local gardens starting up already. I think the hardest thing is everywhere in the world, like in Africa, Guatemala, these kids who want to come in, they all want to be soccer players. They want to be film stars and, making computer games. No one wants to do farming. So you got to find that ticket that motivates them is the main thing. And I did one thing. I'm not saying it's the thing to do here, Bob. But I did one thing in Guatemala that worked, and we don't stay with it because sometimes we don't have to, but we started with us, the kids came in from school and we started with us 1 square yard. Each kid got 1 square yard. And we taught him, the ground was real hard and it's full of rocks and sand and he couldn't dig it with the tools, but we taught him to double dig. And they took care of that 1 square meter. And after about a day, with the composting, and they could reach down with their long skinny arms 2 feet and pull up the soil from the bottom. And now it was ready to plant. And the main thing I'm saying here is that square meter gave them success immediately. And that's what the ticket I think is here. One other thing we learned with community gardens is people aren't going to walk 5 blocks to weed their garden. They're not going to walk 1 block. So that whole sustainable, concept of putting your chickens over here in zone 2 and the garden right in front of your house, I think makes sense. I think you should pay attention to that stuff because it's motivating them to come back is the hard thing.
Got a couple more questions in the back. Hold on.
Hi, Kim. Have you considered finding some famous soccer players and film stars to volunteer for free to promote what you're doing?
I have, and I think it's wonderful. Jane Goodall stepped up and signed on, gave us some money. I thought that was a pretty nice endorsement. She's doing her thing too. And actually, Oprah Winfrey did also. She's donated. But what I found out with that is it's one and out. Yeah. You're going to get $5,000, but you're.
I don't mean donate.
Oh.
I meant let they can use. You can use their photograph. You can put them in your presentation so that when you go to the children, say, look, this person is talking, and the famous person says, this is a wonderful program.
It's a great idea.
Like that.
Yeah.
So getting their endorsement.
Getting the endorsement.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I really, really love that. I'm happy with his endorsement.
He's pointing
I'm happy with her endorsement. his. And so that's community.
Okay. We have another question here.
Kim, it's not really a question, it's more a comment. Building on what you said about community gardens, Faith and others started one this year over near the middle school in the park, city park. I'm working with the middle school children group and 3 adults that are, 2 of them are faculty at the school. One is the principal, and one is a social worker there, and then a head of the Kiwanis Club, Builders Club here. And there are 12 children participating. I see it as kind of a beginning. And because this garden is so, for the middle schoolers, because it's so contiguous to the school, it's really ideal. And the adults are taking the responsibility for making the watering schedule and the weeding schedule and the harvest schedule. I'm working with them on what to do with the food that's unfamiliar to them. And just giving them some gardening tips, that Faith or others could do as well. And Barbara Rainbow, who was the instigator of this great project, is also there from time to time to help them. But I see it kind of, I agree, the front yard, the backyard at your home, there's no better location than stepping out the door and having your food right there. But I think this kind of begins to stir the thinking of, because those adults at the school are now saying, we want a garden at the school, can you help us? So that's the ideal. And of course, it comes with problems too, because most of the season when they're in school is not our growing season.
I think it's starting to shift. I think it's starting to get noticed because of people like David and Faith and Bob, All
right. Other questions or comments? Galen?
Where do you see your organization going as far as like how large you want it to be, how successful, what is success to you?
I think, Galen, that one garden that I talk about in Uganda, the news people coming in. See, I've been trying to fundraise bigger and better ways, but I haven't been totally successful. My whole thing has been small donations. And so I stopped banging my head against the wall when I realized something, that it's going to be noticed by those newsmen. They're coming in because when these people come into a refugee camp, they're giving a little piece of land. And that's it. No schools, no jobs, no food, nothing. And when they walk into their place of land, they're carrying sticks to get there. And they build their first shelter, and then they add on and build it with mud and straw, But they have nothing. The kids are going hungry. So what I'm seeing now is, the other people are seeing the gardens. and that's the way it's spreading. And I'm thinking, Galen, that it's going to be a news organization that comes in and said, when did you do this, you know, and take pictures of it. And all of a sudden, I think it can expand that way. I'm not a good fundraiser. You know, I just, you know, truthfully, I bring in about $75,000 a year on social media. And that's from the small donors. So, you know, and you do need money to get this thing going. There's no escaping that. If you want to bring in people, you know, to do your social media, to do filming, you look at organizations like Charity Water, they're probably putting out $1 million a month on social media, you know, but they're bringing in 30 million. You know, it's
Got another question and or comment here. Hold on.
You've described how powerful it is to have local trainers, you know, propagate and keep the ball rolling. It seems to me that I'm curious if you've got your equivalent right behind you, or a couple of mentees that, if Kim just decided to, you know, go to Mars tomorrow, do you have people in your shoes that can keep your role going?
Yes, I've been talking to them because I'm 72 now. So I don't know, what I got 5 years of doing this, you know. But there are people that I'm talking to, and I've traveled with them, showed them projects. They're younger, very educated. So yes, there are people ready to step in. Probably do a much better job in the fundraising too. Yeah.
Or even delegate the fundraising to one of these individuals right now.
Yeah.
Let's do $750,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you were to expand staff, a development person would be somebody you would bring on?
If I was going to expand staff, the place I think I would go is, I mean, social media is so powerful. I mean, look at the political arena now with TikTok. You know, I don't know how to use TikTok effectively. So people like that new brain, you know, Galen, you know, how do you do it, man? You know, and so I would bring in film people too, you know, having your own film crew to go to areas, and then also maybe even a different face of the organization. You know, I've been doing this 10 years, but you know, it's open. You know, I'm open to anything on it. You know.
Any other questions? All right, let's give Kim another round of applause.